Welcome back, everyone, to Rising Warriors Rachael Kulei. I am Nabi Mia Dachinup, woman that travels with the stars, and I'm an enrolled member of Northwest Spanish Shoshone Nation. And today I have my beautiful sister back with us, Dr. Sherrie Davis. And we've been talking and observing a lot of things that have been going on during COVID time. And she's been going through her own experience through purging and moving through different relationships. And so coming from both our own backgrounds and experiences in life, and seeing things that's going on in the world right now, we felt that this was a really good time to talk about de-stressing your life from toxic people. And that doesn't just have to mean an intimate relationship or marriage. It could also be work related. It could be friendship. It could be even, family. So there's different ways, that those the relationships within that of having toxic people in your life can play out. So I felt that this was very important at this time because I'm seeing a lot of people and a lot of my clients, they're going through transitions and shifts. And when we're elevating ourselves and we're trying to move into a higher direction and vision and getting on our path in life, sometimes there's our vibrations and our energies, we sync up with people at some point in time, but then as we're elevating, either those people around us need to be elevating with us, or we come to I call it the fork in the road, where you either have to choose to continue to walk this way with these people and not live in your true happiness, or you have to like kind of walk away with that love in your heart, and go this other way, because this is where your calling is, and this is where your drive is, and your happiness and your soul purpose. And so sometimes we have these toxic people in our life that tries to sabotage us, tries to keep us, from having that happiness. And they kind of like to pop up and say peekaboo when we're having that happiness. And I've been seeing that myself this past couple days, with past relationships and things popping up and saying, hey, peekaboo, and we're going to try to trigger your PTSD, and we're going to try to instill fear back in your mind so you don't get on the podcast this morning and you don't talk. And so, there's all these different things. But at the same time, we have to have also support and healthy relationships around us too, to help us as we go through this. So I brought Sherrie on here, and for those of you that don't know, she owns and she's a practitioner and owner of Northwest Hypnosis and Integrated Medicine here in Vancouver, Washington. So she has a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share with us today, and talk about her own experiences and things, and what she's seeing, too, that's going on in the world, and any way that we can help assist. Because sometimes when you're alone in the world and other people aren't awake around you, or as awake, or don't really see, those toxic people can make you feel crazy. It kind of make you feel like it's all in your head and things. And so we're here today to, remind you, or be that ear and that voice to say that you're not alone, and that these things are real, and that it does happen. And here, we're going to give you some tools and experience to deal with this and go through this with your life. So I'm going to welcome Sherrie. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate you having me on again today. And like Rachel said, it is important as we transition in our life, and through our growth, the biggest thing that I always see with patients is when they're growing and they're expanding and going in so, these great positive directions, if their partner, their family, or their friends, are on that same kind of energy level or mindset, So really, if you think about mindsets too, our, negative energy can cause stress, right? But it could also cause, blockages in our life. It can cause things like not allowing ourselves that permission to move forward in our life, and look for our true path as well, or be in that path. So often when we have, like, and I'll use, for instance, a partner, a relationship, even an ex, that still wants to attack or belittle or create drama in our life. I always say, I don't allow those, excuse my abbreviation on it, but I don't allow drama bitches to be in my life, right? It's like, and that could apply to any, level, man, woman, whatever, friends, that kind of thing. And so I always believe in, no, I've got to keep my level up at a little higher level where, I feel good and positive and, and I'm going in that great direction of life, whether anybody else, shares that same direction with me. Everybody's on a different level of their path, right? You've got people down here who want to stay in that negative path, or they always want to stay in the state of destruction. Well, what does destruction and self-sabotage do? It also destroys everything else around us, including our personal relationships with, with our lovers, our friends, our family members, whatever it is. And often you'll see people who are very destructive, or they have that, negative kind of way about them, or jealousies even, that can, cause issues in relationships or with friendships. And I've experienced that personally myself, a few times. So in different people, whether it's friendships or family members, or, people that didn't really have my best interest at heart, who I thought would have. So it's always those people that you would think that would have your best interests at heart that sometimes really don't, So then it shows us, oh, wow, this is our reality of who our true friends are, or, what our, relationship possibly, level that it would be at. And so when we deal with, toxic relationships, we really got to analyze ourselves as well, and kind of look at, okay, where am I at in this situation, in this picture? And why am I attracting this? What is it that is creating or causing this kind of destruction, unhealthy, kind of draining, situations with the relationship? And often it's because we don't match up, there's that commonality that you have with that person. Sometimes we don't have commonalities with them. And often that can cause some issues. But it's really about, what do we hold in that relationship? Often things like drugs or alcoholism can cause a severe amount of destruction in a relationship. It's a sabotaging, so, like, for instance, I've experienced this recently, with alcoholism, and just people being, with patients, and with even a personal relationship where, when somebody has a problem with alcoholism, it also destroys the relationship they have with that partner. Because often that alcoholism is just another way for them to mask what their true issue is. And they don't really deal with their issue. So what do? They take it out on that person that's to them. And then they sometimes will run away and not face or have the conversation that they need to have with that partner or even family members. And so it's just a way of self-destructing themselves, but also creating that negative drama that they will constantly do. And instead of recognizing that the patterns are unhealthy patterns, so that it's not helping the situation in the relationship, or helping, their own relationship with themselves, which is so important. I think that when people don't see that relationship with themselves, whether it's, creating goals that, positive mindset thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and basically creating a happier life, right? And when you're dealing with someone that's doing, drugs, or they're, drinking too much, have too much alcohol, often they can be very negative. Of course, you have the happy drunks too, right? Which is a total opposite side, where they're always happy. I had a cousin like that who was like, he always drank a lot, but boy, he was happy all the time, and never negative, which was kind of nice. But that was because that was his personality trait. Even prior to him drinking, it just brought that personality out more. So you'll find that drinking, I call it the truth serum. Brings out the true person within who they really are, because alcohol is like, what do you call it, where it allows you to be an unfiltered person, you say, and your feelings are out here, right? It's like, here, I'm just going to express and puke all over you with my negativity that, would actually be stuff that they harbor deep down inside emotionally, within themselves and how they feel. And so even if it's not, sometimes we'll feel like it's a direct attack on ourselves, but really it's the true self of the person that you're dealing with. And so, and then from that, even family members and friends, I remember when I started my practice 11 years ago, here I was married at that time. And I thought, he would have my best interests at heart, of starting that business. He was like the one that ended up being that had no interest at heart. I mean, he was totally against me, and telling me, oh, you just need to go back and work for the corporate world. You can't work for yourself. You won't be successful. So these are the kind of things that I was hearing. But the thing is when people tell you you can't do something, now I'm one of these people that is like, oh, hell no, I'm going to prove I can do 5 to 10 times better than what you think I can do, right? So now I'm really going to do it. And so, with that, we often, some people, they just aren't that way, where they let that person demotivate who they really are and demotivate their goal and take them on a totally different path that is not their path. Right. So when we talk about de-stressing toxic relationships, for instance, toxicity can come in different levels. Like I said, people with drug or alcohol addictions, that's another form of toxicity. People that have abusive tendencies, that's a huge amount of, abusive traits that can happen. And then you add other things to that and it just gets worse. I think a lot of people that stay stuck in those relationships, they don't see their worth because their power has been taken away by that person that abuses them. So it's really about recognizing ourselves, bringing our worth back, and I call it our power. Because really, it's like having your power taken away and stolen from you when that abuser is constantly abusing you. Because then you start believing that mindset of what they're telling you when it's not true. And they'll call you, oh, you're a liar, or, you're whatever. They'll degrade you in other ways, for instance, or tell you that you're not worth anything. And so... and I see this sometimes in patients, I see a lot more female patients than I do men, but often I will find the abuser as a man more than I find with a woman. But there are women that are abusive towards their men, so there is that too. You may not see it quite as much, or it might be more hidden because the men are too embarrassed to talk about it or share that. Often you'll see it in their personality traits on how they act around that partner when they're out and about or with friends or family, and that partner's, pretending to be such a great person and treating that person like, really good at that time when they're with them in public. But then behind closed doors, oh, it's a totally different picture. You're going to get that person constantly beating you up emotionally, sometimes physically. And so when we de-stress from toxic relations like that, it's really about giving ourselves the power and the will to move forward and move on without them. and to de-stress our life from this clutter, you know, that we hold as well. I know anytime that I've, you know, kind of shifted away from a toxic relationship, if they lived with me, I also purged some of the things that we had together, you know, that energy attachment there that we have, and that memory of that, you know, here we shared this together, you know, whether it's furniture or something else. And so it's always good to like refresh, right? Start over, kind of bring in a new energy, find your power, who you are emotionally and physically, and really like notice within yourself that often when you do move forward past a toxic relationship, it's really about re-entering that new path of you, right? Bringing in that self-awareness and being able to detect things like, wow, now I have my freedom, you know, now this is my space, not somebody who's going to toxically degrade me all the time or say things to you that are disrespectful or unkind. And so, you know, and those things are, you know, huge indicators of toxic relationships. You know, if you look at what toxicity is, you know, it's somebody who doesn't have your back when you need them the most, somebody who constantly talks you down or belittles you or picks on you for, you know, things that shouldn't even be brought up, shouldn't even be in the picture of communication, right? You know, I had somebody who would always, you know, gripe at me all the time and constantly complain about the stuff I had stored in my garage, right? Constantly complain, well, that's my stuff. Yeah, I need to purge it. But the whole thing is that's not part of the relationship, right? That's not part of anything to do with the partnership, for instance.
Right.
And so, you know, those are things. Those things could be taken care of, right? Or purged or divided or broke down, whatever. We can throw stuff away, which I have multiple times, right? You know, downsize, and we all do what we consider spring cleaning. Sometimes my spring cleaning is just purging all kinds of things, you know, letting it go, besides just cleaning the house physically. But it's also about, what do I need to renew? What do I need to refresh, you know, within myself? And really finding yourself again. You know, often we lose ourselves within a toxic relationship, and then we lose our identity with it. And so that part is really important to really, you know, find who you are, even that new you know, even if you're not the old person that you were before, now it's time to find who you are today, right? That growth, that pattern that you want to have, your goals. You know, I did a really cool class a couple years ago when we were allowed to have groups and stuff, hoping to get it back going again. But I did a class on manifesting your goals. What does that look like for you, right? Goals can be anything from, you know, say a positive relationship, someone who respects you. It can be what you want to do in your life path, you know, your career. Maybe it's about taking a trip somewhere that you've never went to, you know, but always when you're doing these things, you always want to have that positive mindset behind it as well. You don't want to have a toxic person always degrading or saying you can't do that, right? When somebody says you can't do that, what are they saying? They're taking away your power. Right? They're taking away something that you have the desire to do, and this is your goal. And, you know, and of course, you know, you want it to be a positive goal, nothing, you know, negative or to do with something that's going to be degrading within yourself or self-sabotaging. But something positive, you know, that you can create, whether it's with your kids or yourself or your friends or family, whatever it is. But also finding that circle of people around you that are your best support. You know, most time toxic relationships will tell you that, you know, the people that are closest to you, they'll drive you away from those people and they'll create divide so that they can have you in solitude. And so that way, you no longer have friends to support you or family members that can come to your rescue. Often you'll see abusers divide people like that from their relationships all around them. And then pretty soon those relationships become lost, right? They hold no value anymore. And so, but that's why it's so important that, in those toxic relationships, that you never allow for that divide to happen, because that little piece is so important, that as we do transition in our life, or we have things that happen in our life, we always have that positive support that's there. It's like, I was so grateful when Rachel and Eric and her mom and a few friends of my other cousins showed up to help me move this last week. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? Right. How am I going to be able to move all this stuff that I've accumulated for so long? And it's too much for me to do by myself. And heavy furniture. I mean, I have big, bulky, heavy furniture. So yeah. And so there's no way I could move that on my own. So I was so blessed and grateful that Rachel and Eric and everybody else came to my rescue, really, to support me in this new adventure, moving forward and helping me move to the place that I moved to. And so, but, you really, it's important that you have those positive, people that always have your back, always, because then you'll always have their back as well. Where your boundaries are with those people. But with, de-stressing your life from toxicity and toxic relationships, it's really about purging, things that, you no longer need with that person or in that relationship, and letting it go if it doesn't suit your purpose in a positive, healthy way. And so, because when we don't have that, positive support with that person or family members, I've even cut ties with family members. I've had patients do that as well, because those family members are so toxic and negative. And you just don't need it. You don't need that. I always tell my brother that, they might be family and they might be blood, but if they are negative and they're constantly causing a drain in your life or trauma or drama, then that, like anything, you got to look back and go, well, if they weren't family members, would they be my friend? Right? And if they would not be the type of person that you would have personally as a friend, then you need to create a boundary with that relationship or cut it off. So I've done that with an older brother, that's like, nope, I don't need your toxicity anymore. You're too toxic, you're abusive, you're alcoholic, you have all these things that create sabotage within everything. And if that person doesn't look at the facts that they need to find counseling, or they need to find a way to get better and create a positive mindset for themselves, and they never do that, it's never going to change. I always say, well, we create the same patterns over and over and over, and we expect a different outcome. Well, good luck with that.
Right.
Because most likely it will not happen. It's so true, and so we really have to look at, even ourselves, what are we bringing into these relationships? Are we creating some of the negativity along with it that can aspirate or aggravate and cause more of that toxicity in the relationship? And so it's really, again, goes back to that positive mindset thinking. If we don't have it, then we need to learn it, right? We need to learn those ways of creating positivity in our life. But, purging and kind of letting go of things, and even past relationships that didn't serve us in a great way. No, we really need to cut those ties off when they're abusive and toxic towards us, because that abuser often really doesn't ever go away unless we create that boundary and we allow ourselves that permission to say, I no longer need this person in my life. They don't serve my purpose in a healthy, positive way. They don't bring value. So when you find somebody who doesn't bring value to you, or they don't see you for your highest, best, and good, and they don't value who you are as a person, and they're constantly degrading you in some way or another, you've got to be able to see that that person does not value you. They don't, hold you in that positive, way like you may hold them. And when that happens, we have to learn how to protect ourselves, right? Bring boundaries for ourselves. And also, rid that toxicity as well, if the person continually abuses in many ways. And so one of the ways is, just kind of recognizing that they don't serve your purpose in a good way. They don't bring that positive light or, purpose to the relationship. Instead, they're constantly degrading, belittling, creating drama and arguments over petty stuff. When you find that people create arguments over petty stuff, it's never going to go away because that person constantly will do it. We always say to ourselves when we're in those relationships, it'll get better. This person will get help, right? But if they don't get help, it's not going to get better. And then we can't see that change. It just doesn't change. And so then we've got to uplift ourselves, and we've got to create that circle in our life that really creates a positive dynamic, in our circle of relationships, with family, friends, even lovers. And so when you look at that and it's time to purge those relationships that don't serve you in a good and positive way, then it allows you to actually see things in a positive light. The dark people or people that cause toxicity in your life or destruction, often it's like having a dark cloud hovering over you. So you can't see your purpose, right? You can't see that, oh my goodness, I can do and have anything I really want, even though this person is telling me I can't.
Right.
Right. And so it's like wearing that dark cloud over the eyes, right? I can't see my purpose anymore. I don't have goals. That's been taken away from me. My power has been drained. Often when we're around toxicity like that, your energy will get drained, because that person is constantly feeding off that by verbally abusing or physically abusing. So pretty soon that spirit of yourself becomes drained. You no longer have that self-image or power of yourself, that good positive mindset, because you become clouded by what's happening. And so, I often with patients, counseling them and helping them find their self-worth and their confidence. Often when we're being beat up like that, we lose a little bit of our confidence and our self-worth. We really do. And, and even growing up with parents who are abusive, that too can really play on how we are as an adult. What do we do in our adulthood? Do we create the same patterns that we learned from childhood over and over? Or do we look outside of that and see that, oh my goodness, I don't have to live within that toxic environment anymore, because now you're growing and an adult and you can have and do anything that you want now, instead of living in that negative household, And you'll find people that do follow that. Yeah, you take your power back. Yeah, you take who you are, so, but yeah, does anybody have any questions or anything on that?
Like, does anybody have any questions? You can type and add. But one that came to me is, so what I noticed too is like, so if we have two different mentalities. So sometimes, because I've been on both sides of that abuse, where I, at one point I was just like taking it and, I believe it. And I start really, believing all of these hypnotic suggestions in a sense that's being told to me, versus, and then then there's this downplay of it. But then there's also the other side
Yeah.
of it, which you have to be conscious and, you know, self-aware that, okay, so like this happened with me last night. You know, I was getting these incoming messages from a toxic person, and all of it, like, it put me in two places. It was either I could go back down into PTSD and I could allow it to trigger all of these spiritual warfares and abuse and things that I lived for 8 years, or
Right.
I had to go on this mental battle of, no, I know who I am. No, I can't go down this again. No, you know, these people don't have power over me like this. No, I'm taking my power back. You know, I've been working on taking my power back and my voice back. And no, you're not going to sabotage me. So there's this set. And so I was like, what would be like some tools, you know, for people that are trying, that never really, you know, had exposure to having the healthy mindset to be able to mentally go and say, no, I'm not listening to you. No, you know, to have oh, you're going to tell me no, well, I can do whatever I want type, you know, mentality. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because there's a lot of people that, you know, don't have those tools, but they know it's possible, but it's like, what are those tools to kind of get to that place?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We really have to look at, you know, creating a different dynamic within our environment, right? One of the thing is, what are we living in? Basically, are we living with somebody who's like that? And taking ourselves out of that environment is the first step, because then it allows you to see that, oh, wow, you can actually have a life that is free of toxicity and drama and abuse, you know, or negativity. Once we take ourselves out of the environment of that, then we can actually breathe a little bit, right? We can actually see that, you know, we can take our power back. We can, you know, be a whole totally different person that person wouldn't let us be, you know, our true self. And two, creating boundaries, right? What are your boundaries? That's so important, you know, because a lot of people don't create boundaries, or they don't speak their voice.
Right.
They allow that person to kind of steal their voice a little bit, you know, not let you speak or not let you have your voice or your word, you know. And it's really about learning to take that voice back, right? Speak up for yourself. And if it's really toxic and abusive, you know, seek help, and to be able to find your self-worth and to be able to get your confidence back as well. So sometimes, you know, certain types of counseling can help with that. You know, it doesn't always have to be just talk counseling. It can be spiritual counseling, where you work on, you know, the physical, the emotional, and the purpose.
Right.
And so it's really about finding the balance in the different elements of yourself. You know, what is your purpose? Bringing back your power, putting up your boundaries, and creating new dynamics in your life. Like, you know, whether it's creating that goal board or life board, I call it sometimes, you know, creating that new life board for yourself that says, well, here's the direction that I truly want to go. Here's my life now, but I'm going to take this red door over here that's toxic stuff from that past, and then I'm going to shut that door, and I'm going to move over here to the blue door, and I'm going to walk through that blue door with confidence, with willingness, with that self-empowerment, and I'm going to create those positive, healthy goals for myself. Because often those toxic relationships will take your goals away. They'll say they're stupid, right? Or they'll demotivate them in some sort of way, and not allow you to do it if you allow them to take your power, if you allow them to take control of who you are. Sometimes I'll find this with women who are codependent on the men because they don't work, you know, and then so financially and physically, they're totally dependent on that partner. No, and often within that dynamic, you'll see that control and that a little bit of abuse, or you'll see, that person has no power over decision making, right? They have no power. If that partner is toxic and not seeing their value within the relationship, and really seeing your own value as well. That's another thing that's really important, asking yourself, what is my value? Evaluating it and creating that life goal for yourself, creating that board that looks like, hey, I want a great career. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to find ways to build myself back up. And so often you'll see that people lose their identity within that toxicity, of that person that they're with or the relationships that they have, and they listen. Often I say the people who are toxic usually have pretty bad advice, right? And they take you down their path, not yours, right? So really they're taking you down a path that doesn't really serve your purpose in a positive, healthy way. It's really what they would choose, not you. And so then you've got to decide, well, do I really want to take their bad advice, or do I want to take my true advice that I feel deep down inside that is right for me? And so that too, you've got to listen to that inner voice. You've got to listen to yourself. You can't always listen to that toxic person that's really only for the best of themselves, not for you. And so, because often toxic relationships and people that are like that don't have your best interests. They're all about themselves, number one, right? They don't care about you. It's all about themselves and no one else. And so, and you find in their patterns that everything is about themselves, right? It doesn't have anything to do with you. It's all about them. And so, and what they're getting out of you as well, whether they're using you for something or, anything else, they don't really, see your value. And, but also clearing the cords from toxic relationships. People often don't know what cords mean, but what it is it's a energetic frequency that drains us from that toxic relationship. And so often those frequencies can cause pain or illness in the physical body. And if it's male energy that is toxic and draining you, it'll be on the right side of the body and create tons of pain or weakness in that side of the body. If it's female, it'll be on the left side of the body. Often I'll find those cords around the solar plex or the heart chakra, the heart wall, and that heart wall will just be like so hard and bound up and corded up in so much, destruction and, sabotaging energy that comes from that person, the person in the relationship. And so the cords often, when I start to release those cords from patients and I'm talking to them about, the dynamics of where they come from, what age it may have started from. And, like a lot of women, for instance, have experienced a ton of trauma from even childhood, whether it's abuse from childhood from the parents or whether it's being raped or having something else really toxic or negative happen to them. We all deal with it differently, of course. Some people still stay in that, sabotaging energy or that negativity that can happen to us. And other people, they just look beyond it and move forward and try to better themselves and no longer look back. So often, really, it's really about not allowing yourself to look back and go back to the old person or the relationships that really aren't a healthy relationship, and being able to move forward and pass that and feel good about it, not hold guilt over anything that person has done or said or made you feel like you weren't worthy or something else like that. So, and our tools too, clearing those cords, clearing the energy. What I like to do is sage and clear the energy, not only around myself, but do a ceremony to heal, from that toxic relationship, and allow yourself physically, emotionally, mentally and spiritually to move past those toxicities and de-stress yourself. One of the big things is really finding a way to, to de-stress, to clear that toxicity that you no longer need to carry. I call it the emotional backpack that we carry from others, right? It's like carrying this big, heavy backpack on our backs that say, oh, I'm going to carry this sabotage. I'm going to carry this abuse. I'm going to carry this trauma, and keep carrying it. And then all of a sudden triggers will happen, right? That can cause anxiety or panic attacks or, forms of PTSD, those types of things. And so we can have those subconscious triggers. And so it's really about, understanding where it's coming from at the time that it happens.
Right.
And being able to move past it with allowing yourself to bring your confidence back, ground your energy as well. I find that when people are not grounded, when you talk about grounding, like at your feet, when we connect to Mother Earth, right? Often I'll tell people, well, go barefoot and walk and stand in the grass for a little bit, because that helps to ground and reconnect you. It helps to recenter our energy. Have you ever noticed that when we're out in the forest, we're hiking, we're doing something that's outdoors, or the sun is shining, and we have this positive, higher energy, right? Because it regrounds us, and we need that energy. And when we're drained, we won't even have the energy or the mental capacity to go out and do those things, because we feel so drained from our energy and we feel toxic. Often toxic energy too can cause headaches. It could cause you to feel sick all the time. No energy at all, tired, constantly fatigued. That too can happen. And, and I realized too, when I was in a toxic relationship, I would wake up and I'd be like, the person laying next to me, well, I could feel their energy. And anytime they would drink, guess what would happen? I would get the headache. Or my neck would hurt, or my low back would hurt. And all of a sudden I'd be like, why am I feeling this way? I didn't have any alcohol. I'm not a drinker, right? Or do drugs or any of that stuff. And so after a while, I had to analyze where that was coming from. What was it truly? And to decord that energy for myself. One way to really think about cleansing negative energy. And here's a really good exercise to do. If you think about water, right? How water refreshes us and awakens us. Often what I'll do in the shower after I get done washing and doing my thing, my routine, well, then I'll stand under the water for a while, and then I'll just brush my arms, my legs, my stomach, my back, whatever I can reach, and I'll just brush it off, right? Clear that energy. And then I'm thinking about, what do I want to clear that could be draining me? Even if we don't know what it is, you just ask your body to remove, to clear, and release these things. It's like as if you're pulling something off of you and you're throwing it away, right? But then you're allowing the water to cleanse and move through your body and ground you also to Mother Earth, and you create that dynamic. Often there's 2 pressure points you can also use right here on the chest, right below the collarbone, that first little indent there. And you cross your hands over like this, because then you're going to ground the polarity. You're going to bring balance as well into your system. But when it's sore and you rub, and it's sore, that means the lymphatic system is blocked up for some reason. Whether it's toxic stuff that we're carrying from someone else, their energy, their sabotage, their attacks, or, their constant abuse. And that will affect the entire system, cellularly, lymphatic, organ functions can be affected as well, because each organ holds an energy. If you think about your heart, not only pumps energy, right? So it's constantly moving, but so do the organs. That's how they flush things and how they absorb the cells and minerals and whatever we're taking in. Everything has an energy frequency to it. And so do other people. So our physical body puts off an energy. So we're probably ever, and I'm sure most people have experienced this, where after they've been around someone really toxic or they constantly talk about negative things, all of a sudden you're drained, right? You have no energy and you feel like you need to go lay down and take a nap, basically. And you do, because that nap helps to recharge your system. But at the same time, we have other tools that we can use to clear that negative energy. And one of those tools is, the shower, taking that water, cleansing it, walking out in the grass, standing in the grass barefoot and taking in the energy and regrounding and centering, clearing the cords, pulling that toxic, yucky stuff off of you. No longer holding that baggage, from that person. Because we all kind of do it from time to time, I'll admit that happens to me too. But I recognize it the minute it happens, and I clear the toxicity and I no longer carry it. And you'd be surprised at how you feel so much more mentally and physically open, and your energy comes back. And so you just feel refreshed, and energized again. And so when you do the technique where you cross here and push on those pressure points, it's going to ground you here at your feet, but it's also a tool that you can use to take some deep breaths, breathe out whatever it is that is bothering you, or that toxicity or abusive energy that is, being put up on you basically from another person. And so what I would like to do is just kind of ground here, breathe out, let that toxicity go, no longer hold it. And you're going to send it out to the universe, right? You want to ask the universe to cleanse it, purify it, bring healing to it, but yet release it from yourself, no longer holding on to that physical trauma, attacks, negativity or abuse, clearing those energies out, getting rid and decluttering that toxicity, no longer holding it or carrying it, taking that emotional baggage that we all carry. And I want you to imagine that you're going to take that emotional baggage and you're going to just take it off of the back or wherever you hold it, whether it's your neck or low back or the heart wall or the solar plex, just clearing it, letting it go, letting it drop off, decord it, and just clear that energy. It's like you're going to take that knife and cut it off, right? Clear that energy away. Often what I'll do is use a quartz crystal or selenite, which is a really good cleansing crystal. And I'll take that selenite and quartz, and I just clear the energy around me. And I have it's at my office, a big, beautiful, long quartz crystal that's about, I would say about this long, right? And it's thick, so I can take it like a sword and take that quartz and just run it through over my body, clear anything that needs to be cleared. Selenite can do the same thing. It looks like a quartz. It's just a little bit more crumbly. Yeah, like that. There you go. Yeah, some quartz. And so, yeah, if I had my selenite somewhere, but I've been moving, so everything's all over in boxes.
It'll appear.
It will, yeah, exactly. Everything's all packed up right now until it comes back out, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, and those tools are so important to be able to use in our everyday life. We have coworkers that can drain us as well, that can be a toxic energy and they basically, it's like having someone constantly clenching onto you. They're constantly feeding off of your positive energy. And that can be a complete drain emotionally and physically. And then we get it stuck in our head, right? What that person just said or did. And it's with us for a while until we decide to let it go and to clear it. But, some of the tools, like I was saying, walk in grass with bare feet, ground to the energy, do the exercise where you cross your hands over 3-4 deep breaths, or however many deep breaths you feel like you need to take. Sometimes it's like more than 3 or 4, it could be 6 or 8 or 10, whatever you feel like you need to let go. And, even toxicities from our childhood, some people carry that burden with us, of toxic abuse that could have happened from when we were a child, even from friends or family members or whoever. And, and as we become an adult and we get in those toxic relationships, we don't see those patterns because we've lived with it our entire life. And so then you've got to be able to recognize the patterns and use that as a tool to say, oh, no, I already lived in that, been there, done that, not going to repeat it again, right? Not going to take and re-enter that phase. I always say, I've already moved past it, right? I've already closed that door. I no longer need to relive it.
Right.
And so, and we have a choice. We have choices to be able to choose it or get rid of it. And so when we talk about decluttering or de-stressing our life from these things, toxicities, there's so many ways to do it, saging the house, clearing the energy. I remember one time I did a paranormal investigation out in Battleground at a chiropractic office. And when I was out there, I noticed that the acupuncture out there had a really negative energy, and she had something that wasn't good attached to her. So anytime that you bring a higher vibration into a space, or you yourself are that higher vibration, those toxic people, they'll attack you every time, never phases, even if you don't know them. And so, because you're coming with something good, right? And I remember this lady coming up to me. I was talking to the chiropractor in the lobby, and she was just finishing up with the patient, and that patient was leaving. I hadn't even started yet because I was waiting for everybody to leave, and the secretaries were going to walk around with me. Well, the acupuncturist lady comes out and yells at me and the doctor, and I'm looking at her like, what, lady? I don't even know you. I'm here to cleanse the space because you have paranormal activity in the space and to read where it's coming from. This doesn't have anything to do with you. But what she didn't like is the vibration that I was coming with. Right? She didn't like that spiritual connection and that higher vibration. So she physically, verbally just attacked with these negative daggers like you wouldn't believe. So I had to put up my shield, right? And go, oh my gosh, don't take that on. That's her garbage, not my garbage. I'm not going to carry that for her. Right? So you got to recognize too that you shouldn't be carrying other people's toxicity for them. You need to let them carry their own and figure out how to go deal with it, right? And no longer kind of throw that up on you, because often they will. I remember that lady when she yelled at me, and I told the secretaries, oh yeah, well, she'll go outside and she'll start pacing back and forth and yelling and talking to herself here in a minute when I start saging and doing my first prayer on the building, right? And I'm inside. She did exactly what I said. She went outside after her patient left, got him all checked out, and all I was doing when she blew up at me and the doctor was talking to the doctor in the lobby. She couldn't hear us. She was in her room, way, way back in the office. And so she comes out and she was told that I was coming to do this, but we hadn't started it. And so the chiropractor, he didn't even know how to respond to it. And I was like, wow, okay, so I kind of got mad at her and I told her, you know what, we haven't even started here and you need to stop throwing up your toxic negative energy on me and the doctor. And I go, and when I get ready to do this, I'll let you know. Right. And so I had to create my boundaries with that person. And I didn't even know who they were, but you got to create those boundaries either way. And so once I did create those boundaries, now she knows, oh, I can't walk on this person. I can't abuse this person like I have everybody else that works here. Right. Or anyone around her. And I couldn't believe she was an acupuncturist. And I was like, oh, I won't be getting her acupuncture anytime soon, because who knows what she's putting on that patient as she puts those needles in. Her hands are transferring energy. And when that energy transfers, there you go, right? You wear it. And so it attaches to you. And so, that experience was quite interesting. And of course, she went pacing back and forth in front of the building, yelling at herself and talking and doing all that to herself the whole time the whole hour that I was there, she was doing that back and forth. And I was telling the secretary, I was like, well, she'll be getting her exercise today, walking back and forth frantically in front of the building. And people think, what the heck is that lady doing? Right. And I'm like, just ignore her. We just need to get this done. So, I cleansed the space, and I told the doctor later, well, expect your acupuncture lady to not like this vibration that is here now, and she'll probably be moving out within 3 to 6 months. Well, it was like clockwork. 6 months came up, she was out of there. She was done because she couldn't handle that energy that is now in the space. That higher vibration. So you'll find people that are really toxic or abusers. Now, this was a woman. So like I said, it's not always men that are the abusive or toxic energy. It can be women too. It just depends on, sometimes it's how they grow up. Sometimes it's just who they are in their personality trait. It just doesn't matter. And so, but yeah, and then later she moved out. Right. Just like I was telling him. So the doctor called me up and was like, well, I was glad that you told me to start looking for another practitioner to put in that office. So he started looking within that first 3 months, found someone. And then it was probably about actually the third or fourth month that she gave notice and then moved out. And so too, when you sage or cleanse the space basically from those toxicities, and the person that you're dealing with is toxic, they won't like it. They will not like it, especially if they have something attached to them energetically or spiritually. They'll get really mad and they'll blow up. But that's just also part of their mental mindset and what they come forth with as, who they are. And so whether we sage the space, whether we go out and we recognize, things that really are holding us back, some of the tools of like taking the water, in the shower and cleansing your energy, no longer allowing things to attach to you like glue. So it's basically like things it'll feel like you have heaviness on the neck or the shoulders, like you're holding a big weight right there that really isn't yours. Or you'll call it stress, right? I hold my stress right here. And often that area will be tight. It'll be stretched. You'll get headaches, neck pain, stuff like that. When it comes to what we're absorbing basically from that toxic person.
Right.
And so then you just have to recognize, nope, I don't need to carry that. Let me tear that off of my body, right? Let me take that and just release it, heal it, send it out to the universe to deal with. You don't need to carry it. Standing in the grass is such a beautiful thing. You ever feel like when you're barefoot in the grass, like when we were kids, we used to love to run barefoot in the grass, right? At least we did. We lived out in Pendleton. So, back in the 60s and 70s, that was just what you did as a kid, right? And you always had that. Yeah. You ran around. Yeah. Even without shoes. And but it really, brings that positive energy through the body because you're reconnecting to your true self as well. And then too, sometimes we need that counseling, sometimes we need the counseling to find who we really are now, finding our true path and our own identity again, because we lose our identity in those toxic relationships. And so it's really about not letting someone steal that identity of who you truly are and not let them steal your energy as well. And but hopefully that gives people some tools to use. If you have a quartz crystal, some selenite, clear your energy with it. What I like to do is take my feathers and I'll brush over me and clear stuff out, right? And the feathers too are another way to kind of cleanse and clear your energy.
Right.
It helps you to rebalance and clear what could be attached to you. But I do love the selenite and the quartz crystals because they're really powerful and they work really fast. Another one to protect against toxic negative energy is a stone called pyrite. And pyrite helps to ground, but it also protects. So it stabilizes the energy as well. Rubies are really great for grounding, but it's also really good for emotional support. It helps to, and there's different, red rubies are like a good energy for grounding, but it's also a really great energy to support the emotion and bring that confident energy back up, allow it to exist again and not be drained. And so, yeah, so we have different tools that we could use to de-stress our life from toxic people, right? Toxic relationships. Yeah.
We're going to have to do a manifesting goals. I think
Yeah.
that would be a really good one that we should do.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For everyone. I love it.
Yeah, I'll have to send you the goal board that I created some time ago that was quite cool. And when I did this was probably, oh gosh, how many years have it been now? 7 years, 6 years when I did it. Okay, when I put on my goal board, this is, for instance, people have different goals, right? They all have different things that, we have in our purpose or a life that we want to create. And in my goal board, it was like, taking a trip to Mexico where I'd never been, and wanted to do that, right? And I wanted to just take a ride in a new Tesla car. I didn't want to own it because I couldn't afford to have it, but at least I could take a ride in it, right?
Right.
And then creating my business and making it more profitable, making it more, a business that helps to sustain myself so that I wouldn't have to do something else. And so whether it's with your career or something else that you want to create, I call it our money bucket. We all need one, right? We all need a money bucket because that's how we're going to pay for our expenses and taking our trips and having something for emergencies or whatever it is that you want to use it for. And so all the things, when I looked back at my goal board, it was interesting that day that I did the goal board and I prayed and I asked the creator for these things to happen. I put some of it had a timeline on it and some didn't, so it just was how I created it, where I wanted this to happen within this timeline, date and year, or I wanted this to happen in this month or whatever it was. And so, but when I did that goal board, it was really interesting. I was getting ready to go to a health conference out in Beaverton, and my cousin John was supposed to come pick me up. And earlier that day after work, I had to go to the bank, come back because I was expecting him to pick me up at my office. Well, pretty soon he calls me up. Oh, my friend Michael's going to go with us, but I can't come today because I'm too sick. So he's going to pick you up. Well, earlier that day when I was going to the bank, I saw a Tesla drive by me and I was like, oh, there's that car I want to take a ride in. I just want to ride in it. I'm going to ask the angels to give me a ride in that car. Well, when I came back to the office and Michael picked me up, I had no idea that the car that I passed was that Tesla.
Oh my goodness.
He picked me up in the Tesla and we drove all the way to Beaverton in his Tesla.
I love it.
Talk about manifest something that quick, right? It was like, wow, I actually get to go for a ride in the Tesla. Thank you, angels of my car dreams, right? To be able to ride in that Tesla. And then later that week, the business became stronger, and then, within a year, I took that trip to Mexico. No, and there was so much on there that actually, when I look back, I actually did it all. Everything that was on that goal board. And it was because my mental mindset was focused there as well, and that's so important to how we're thinking, not only about ourselves, but our goals. Do we truly believe in it? And that's a big thing. Do we believe in ourselves even, so that's really, really important. Believing in yourself and believing in your goals and believing in who you are, which is such a big, important part because we can get lost from all those things when we're in those toxic relationships, because then our mindset changes. We start believing them that we can't have these things or can't, create our goals or have that positive mindset because they're so negative and toxic that it drains us. Now we
Right.
don't have the will to do it anymore, or the drive,
Mm-hmm.
or the
And then,
passion.
or there's that fear of even being able to
Mhm.
do what you want to do. And am I going to be okay doing it? Or
Yes,
is there going to be some type of backlash? And, you
yes,
know, and that
right.
what, and, even coming out of a toxic relationship too,
Yes.
I remember still, having those fears, sometimes they still,
Mhm.
they come and creep up because of the mental abuse that happened. It's like, am I going to be okay? And, or
Yeah.
am I saying the wrong thing as a native? Or, like I wasn't as traditional as my ex, or like, as far as like language wise. And so, there's all these things. So in
Right.
life, we go on with these fears. So what she's talking about with this dream board is it's almost like you're going back into, I always say, go back to the childlike mind, in
Yes.
that child state of this essence of the sense of dreaming. When we're a
Mhm.
child, we're constantly dreaming.
Yes.
We're creating, our imagination. And the imagination is like, I remember when I was a kid, I'm going to the moon. Well, I didn't realize going to the moon could be different, things. But it's
Yeah.
like you have these dreams and things. But so for
True, true.
me, what ended up really helping me out of my past marriage was, you can write things down, but I'm a visual person. So for me, I had
Mm.
to actually like go to magazines and cut out, if it was words or pictures or things like that. And I would just cut them
Yes.
out of what I wanted, cabin in the mountains, beach house, traveling to Hawaii, like all these different things, like you're saying. I want, a different motorcycle. I want to fly a
Mhm.
plane, like all these things. And so I put it down on the dream board. And as we go through life, we can add to it, or we can change it a little bit, or we end up
Yes.
accomplishing everything that's on that dream board. But when you're having this really helped me when I was going through that transition of trying to find that self-confidence and trying to dream again and allowing myself to dream again. Then it was being able to actually like look at pictures and go, I want that, I deserve this. And
Mhm.
going back to these things of like taking your
Mhm.
power back again, like I deserve this,
Yeah.
I deserve to be treated this way, I deserve to
Yeah.
have these things. It's not that I'm being materialistic, because yes, it would be nice, it's not going to be the end of the world if I don't have these things,
Right.
but I know I am deserving of these things, to have nice things.
Mhm.
um and so like you build that dream board, and you put it up somewhere where you can see it every day.
Yeah.
And that way you're reigniting that, and you just keep going. And one of the biggest things that I want to share too is that my mom and my grandma always told me was, never let anyone tell you can't.
Yes, exactly right. So
Never,
powerful.
never let anyone tell you can't do it. And the moment so it's the same
Mhm.
mentality. You try to tell me I can't do it, I'm like, watch me, I'm gonna do it. You just push me even more to
Yeah, yeah.
prove you wrong, that I can't, that I can do it. So, but that's the other
True,
thing with these
true.
toxic people, is they put these limits on you by saying, nope, you
Yes.
can't do it. And then all of a sudden you allow that, their hypnotic suggestion
Mhm.
to
Right.
sabotage you. And now it becomes this like core belief of what they said, oh, I can't do it. So then now you
Mhm.
just put the cap, and you allowed that person to put this cap over the top of you, of this limit of, no, you can't do it, because someone told you can't do it, instead of
Right.
going, well, how do I know I can't do it? I've never tried. And so
Yeah.
I would always say, I don't like, well, how do you know? I'm like, well, you can do it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I can do it. And they're like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, because I can do it. It's just that
Yeah.
mentality, it's like, I can do it. But and I watched
Yep.
this one time. It just came into my mind. I ran track in high school and in middle school, and I was on the varsity in my freshman year, racing against all the seniors. And one meet we were at, there was a senior that we were jumping over the 300 hurdles, and so we she just kept sabotaging over and over. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. I'm going to hurt myself. I know I'm going to do this. I can't do this. But it was someone else that whispered to her, you can't do this. You're going to fall. So then all of a sudden I watched someone tell her she can't do it. She's going to fall. Then I watched her now going into this mentality of I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall. I'm going to hurt myself. And boom, the gunshot. And she jumped over the first hurdle, clipped it, fell, broke her arm.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so it was like, it was, so that's that toxic, that core belief. She believed it instead of fighting back at that moment in time and say, you know what, I've been practicing. I've jumped over these hurdles so many times in practice. I can do it. How dare you tell me I can't do it? But she allowed someone to come in and sabotage her, where the first jump that she did, she fell flat on her face and broke her arm. And so that's, that's the mentality, that, you also have to try, you push through of someone, that's toxic, trying to tell you, you can't do it. They're trying to keep you from your goals and your dreams, because anyone, that is not toxic is going to be cheering you on. And, even may say like, you got your, a big award for, the flute music that you do, and just as an Indigenous woman. And there's two things, as as your sister and friend, like I could be jealous and I could be, oh my goodness, like how dare her, take that. I'm the one that deserves to be up on that spot, even though I haven't put in the time and the hours like you have, to playing the flute music, but I deserve it. So you can't do it. You can't have it, type thing. And we get in this mindset, and it's not healthy. And it's like, why can't we just be happy for each other and cheer each other on? I always say there's enough I danced in a professional dance company many times. There's enough for 35, 40 of us, 100 of us to be on that stage and everyone have a spotlight and shine and be seen. And so, it's also help, being that self-aware of like, okay, I'm going to also cheer you on. Even though I may be going through my crap right now, I'm still going to cheer you on. And yes, I do have this little bit inside me that's like, dang, like if I would have just done this or that, like I could have been there too. But, that goes down that toxic, self-sabotage again. So it's like, you just have you have to give yourself that grace, right?
You do.
And, the grace of like, all right, I've been through here. I went through these things. Yes, I'm not where, Sherrie is over here, but I can get there. And it just takes time and diligence and practice. And, it takes that self-practice every day. One of the biggest things that popped up in my head earlier when we were talking about self-image was, one year, it was on the last little bit before my divorce ended. And I was just having a really hard time with my self-image. And I was at a powwow and I was dancing and things. And then afterwards I was on a break and I was, just looking at all the different vendors and things. And this gentleman came up to me and he goes, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I have some words to share with you." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I see your pain." He goes, "You don't believe you're beautiful." And I just instantly, looked at him and I just started bawling. And I was like, no, I don't know what I look like anymore. I've been so abused that I think I'm ugly. I used to like punch myself in the face and like scratch my face, because I believed I was told I was ugly and I felt ugly. And so I was like, I'll just make myself ugly. And so I self-abused myself. And so he like was looking at me and he goes, "I want you to do something." And he goes, "You are beautiful." And he goes, "But you need to believe it yourself." And he goes, "There could be a line of people over here telling you that you're beautiful, but you're still not going to hear them because you're not believing it yourself." And so this was the biggest thing. So he's like, gave me a homework and I want you guys to do this. If you're going through, self-image, This is what really helped me. And I still do it to this day. And that was, about 8 years ago. So he told me to go stand in the mirror and hug myself and look at myself in the mirror. And I'm going to look at myself right here at the camera. So look at myself and I just say, I love you. I didn't really believe it. I'm like, I love you. And he just said, just keep staring at yourself. I love you. I love you. You're beautiful. I love you. You're strong. You can do this. You're a warrior. I love you. Look at you. Look at where you've gone. Look at these things that you've gone through and how far you've come, and you're a warrior. Love you. And I just kept saying, I love you. I love you. And looking at myself until finally I just started crying. But at first I was like, yeah, I love you. Like, you're like, I love you. I love you. But then, and I was kind of being sarcastic about it at first, but then as time went on, it was like, oh, like I need to tell myself I love you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's so important. Because I think if we look at our self-image and reflection in the mirror, we often become clouded about who we are, what we look like, and physically, because, the toxic relationships will tell you that. They'll tell you that you're ugly, or, I had that personally happen to myself recently, with the relationship saying, since I got back from Mexico and was really, really tan, well, I'm part Mexican and Navajo and, Saskatchewan. So I have a lot of dark skin already, but I didn't need that person saying, oh, you're so ugly because you're so dark. That's just, you don't believe in that stuff. When I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, I don't see ugly, but since he said that to me, now I'm going to prove him 100 times more wrong,
Right.
So it's really about, I'm kind of stubborn that way. So I think, some people can be a little bit stubborn in their ways, which is kind of good in a way, and other times that's not. But when somebody is trying to sabotage you or make you feel belittled, or, make you feel like, your worth is nothing, or that you are ugly, like you were saying, that's just another way to abuse someone. It's that mental abuse is actually worse than physical abuse in some cases.
Yep.
And so physical abuse is bad too, it really is, because then you carry that toxic energy that is attached to you. But the emotional abuse can be so taxing on us, because then we carry that way that what they kept telling us, we think it's true, right? When it really isn't true at all. So you got to figure, when you look at yourself in that mirror and you see yourself in that reflection, really look hard at what you see, and if you feel like you can't really see it, what I like to do is just kind of squint my eyes and pretend I'm someone else looking from the inside out. Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. Now I can see my true self. Right. Then open your eyes and go, oh yeah, there I am. There's that beautiful person that I've always will be and always have been. Right. It's just that other person tried to take that beauty away from you, because they're so, you got to really look. Yeah. And just see your true energy, who you are really as a person, your soul. Often you'll find that people that are abused by, toxic negative energy are the givers, the people who are always helpful. They're always have that positive, loving heart, with whoever they encounter. And other people can become jealous of that. They can become jealous of who you are because you're a kind person. I know I was told by my ex, oh, you're just too nice. I don't like that about you. Okay, and I was like, what? Well, why would niceness be bad, right?
Right. I've been told that too. It's confusing. It's like,
I would rather be nice, right? I would rather be nice.
You're too mean. No.
Yeah, exactly. So those things are all belittling things, right? That kind of can play on your psyche that says, wow, really? How is that a negative? But they make it a negative. It's a thing. And then you've got to make sure you don't believe in that negative, thing that they're telling you. Because over time it does affect you quite a bit, emotionally and physically, and just your space around you, how you live your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's so important to not believe that, those words of somebody who, it's like having daggers thrown at you. Here, I'm going to throw this knife at you and tell you, that you're ugly, or I'm going to tell you you can't do that, or I'm going to tell you, something else that isn't good. And so, but we can't wear that, because really that's their true inner, trauma or whatever it is that they want to project on you. And it's not something that you should carry, or that it's really yours to own, because it's theirs to own, not yours. So you can't believe in those, negative words that become thrown at you or projected at you. Often I see women that they, as I counsel them, for, their self-esteem, no longer having to have those triggers from the past toxic relationships. They will have that trigger that'll cause severe anxiety, depression, or PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's really about learning how to no longer allow those triggers to enter your life,
Right.
allow yourself that power to come back and say, no, I can have and do what I need, want, and desire in my life, but I can do it in my way, not somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so like what's interesting for me is because I work more with veterans, and so I deal with more men than women. And so what's
Mhm.
interesting is I'm seeing a lot of these men have narcissistic and toxic women in their lives.
Right.
And so it's interesting how, like,
True.
if, with the
There is.
energy, that they carry from war, that it's met with this
Mhm.
like this toxic relationship until they start working on this healing, and then they start realizing that, oh, I attracted this person, and it's not where I need to be. It's not healthy. It's kind of, some of them, it's like reattracting that, the abuse that happens in the military, and the
Yeah.
control, and
Right.
because you're
Right.
used to someone controlling you and things. But in when you're there, it's a different mindset, because you're you're looking out for each other's best interests and for your life, and so for that support. But then when you
Right.
come back, you have someone else that's not looking out for your best interests, and is supposed to be looking out for your best interest. And
Mhm.
so it's challenging, and
It
so it's
is.
like,
Yeah.
I just want to also speak to the men that are out here, that it's not always just the men, like we've been saying,
Yeah.
that are
Mm-mm.
abusive. Like, I see you men, and just know I do see you, and I hear you, and I see the women that are abusive and towards you, and
Yes.
take care of, they take advantage of the kind-hearted, you know
Very
and
much so.
and it goes on both sides. So it goes back to the
It
yin and
does.
yang. There's the balance, and if there's on women, then it's also men
Mhm.
too. It's not just
Yeah.
one or the other.
No. Mm-mm.
It's both sides. And so I just want, people, it's like, we're not attacking one side or the other. It's both
Mm-mm.
sides.
You
And we
bet it
see it
is.
on
Yeah.
both sides. She just happens to have more clients that are women that go through this,
Uh-huh.
and mine is men. But also,
Mhm.
I attracted the energy of wanting to work with men more than women.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I wanted,
Mhm.
that's what I put out in for my healing,
Mhm.
center, was that
Yeah.
it was more focused for men to get this healing, and to know that they're heard. And so it's
Mhm.
like, because I know there's a lot of women that are holding the space for women, as yourself. So it's like,
Mm.
so I was like, well, I can handle the men over here, and I can handle these big burly guys, these
Yeah.
military
Yeah.
guys. Like, let's do it.
That's it. Yeah,
you know,
that's
and
right.
help them through, you know, their transitions and things like that, and helping on, you know, military couples and families. But
Mm,
it goes
mm,
on both, it goes on both
that,
sides. It's not just one or the other. And
mm-mm,
during this COVID time, it's like everybody, you know, if we want to talk about like drugs and things like an escaping, like
right.
here we also have work. We also have other things that we go and do, right? And so
Mm,
before COVID hit,
yeah.
you know, we have a lot of people that are at work and they'll stay as late as they can to tell, you know, their spouse is asleep and everybody's in bed to come home, or they're out, you know, doing whatever. And, you know, there was more freedom to be out and away from home, and then, you know, to avoid those situations and to avoid the real trauma or toxic or the real issue that's going on in the home. And everybody's just kind of been running from it, but then all of a sudden COVID hits, throws everybody like in this timeout in a sense. And it's like, and it
Yeah.
but it's like revealed, you know, everybody's homes in a sense of what
Mm,
works and what doesn't
mhm,
work,
it's
you
true.
know. And it could even be like even as simple as I've had clients where they just realize that the size of their home just does not really suit their family. They thought
Mm,
it did
so
because
true.
everybody was gone constantly and nobody would, they were never really home all together until COVID. And then they're like realizing that even just the house is not big enough for, you know, the situation and how many kids we
Mm,
have and or family members and things like that, you know, living. And so you start
sure.
realizing, you know, you're in your personal space. Now you don't have anywhere to go escape. And so, you know, so that's where all of the stuff kind of got revealed, you know, problems, you know, with children, with your spouse, with relationships, with codependency, um, you know, having, you know, it was like we all got faced with our own crap,
Mm,
and you
mhm,
know, and things got revealed. And so I've been seeing a lot of like these relationships. So, you know,
mm,
relationships are that no longer serve purpose anymore. You know, they're realizing that this is not healthy and we can't live like this, and so it's time to go, you
mm,
know, separate ways. And
mm,
or it just did the opposite and it made people even stronger. And so
right.
that's the other thing, is that I got to witness that part of the COVID. Was I got to you know, strengthen my bond, you know, with my soon to be husband. And so it it was like we were forced to be uncomfortable, but in that being uncomfortable, you know, we were forced to be vulnerable and literally like let everything like out, and like, this is it, this is me, and take it or leave it. And so, you know, so, but we were able to work on things healthy in a healthy way. And so there is ways, you know, to fix with toxic, but it goes back to, you know, and healing and things, but it goes back to having that support, and you both have to be on that same page together, or it's not going to work. And then also too, the other partner, so say like we're together and like I'm going and I'm doing the healing, but you don't want to do the healing, but you know, but all of a
Mhm,
sudden
it
I say
happens.
that I'm gonna leave, and this is a separation. If this is gonna, if you don't come on, jump on this board with me, then there's a separation that's gonna happen. But then you're like, oh well, I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to work, so then I'm just gonna do the little bit of stuff that to skate by to get them to think, to get me to think that you're working on the healing, when really you're just doing the little tiny like baby steps, scapegoats in a sense, just to keep me in illusion that you're working on yourself. So that's the
Mhm,
other thing that I've
mhm,
gone through and witnessed, is that, you know, you have to really be able to discern, you know, is your
true.
partner truly from the bottom of their heart wanting to work
Mm,
on themselves?
mhm,
Because they're going to go and do the work. They're going to start looking and resourcing themselves, you know, for that. If you're doing the work for them to get them the help, and then they're like, okay, I'll do it. But then what's going to happen is they're not taking the responsibility. They're going to keep rescheduling and canceling and then no showing. And that's a big, you know, sign right
mm,
there that they're
yeah.
not really wanting to do the healing work. They're just doing it so they don't have to lose you. And it's like keeping that illusion in a sense of, if I abide by these little things for this little bit of time, then eventually she'll forget about it, and then I'll be able to stop, and then things revert back into the old habit again. And then it gets you right when you're like, you're back in the comfortable, and you as a person, you're like, all right, we're working, like this relationship is better. We haven't argued in 2 weeks. It's been 3 weeks. Like, it's been good. Yeah, I've had to tiptoe on, the ice and and the eggshells, but it's been a little bit happier. But then all of a sudden, like, something happens, and then boom, it's like back into that same thing again. And so then you start repeating this cycle of going back and forth of them trying to play, as they play you with this illusion that they're healing and they're working on themselves, but it's really not. And then if you, like with me before, they'll try to almost like pinpoint everything to be your fault, so then they don't have to do anything, and they'll like play the therapist against you sometimes too, to try to get them to think that you're the crazy one. But then it's a whole nother way of shutting your voice down, because they're like, okay, well, I can't, it's a game. I'm going to get the therapist to now think that you're crazy and to get on my side. So now you have no one to validate that you're right.
Right. That's true. And they'll always tell you that they're sorry and won't do it again. And, try to pretend. I call it the pretend I'm sorry, because it only lasts for a short time. Like you said, they, get you back in the reins with them and make you believe that everything's going to be good and get better. But then the pattern just regenerates again later on, whether it's in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because they can't hold that, false self of themselves. They can't hold that very long. It's just their game basically of how they constantly play that person like a yo-yo. I remember a couple patients that I had that were men that had really toxic marriages with women who were like that. I mean, pretty severe toxic stuff that really played on their psyche, unfortunately, and their own self. And they literally were so confused and basically emotionally destroyed by these toxic women. And, and it was unfortunate. And eventually, because it got worse and worse and worse, I just never would ever advise divorce. But in this case, I was like, I think it's time for separation.
Right.
I think it's time for you to live apart, see how that works out, divide that, boundary between them, basically, and bring back their self-worth. Because while they're living in the toxicity, they never are able to really kind of have that peace and have their boundary and have, the ability to really think of for themselves and bring back their self-confidence. Because men too, that self-confidence can be destroyed by toxic relationships, whether it's with a parent, a friend, a spouse, or whatever it is, even if it's not a spouse. So often those patterns will exist too, and we need to see what those patterns are. I figure, like, if I ever enter another relationship again, I'm going to have some serious questions that these people will have to pass.
Right? See, that's what I did with Eric. I became picky.
Yeah.
I became extremely picky.
You have to, because you don't want to re-enter that same pattern again. I always say, they still have the same pattern of abuse. It's just a different face, right? Different person, but they still come with the same intention of jealousies of, even they don't, they lack confidence within themselves. That's why they abuse. Because they have no confidence. And so then you got to look back, well, what happened to them? Why are they acting that way and they're not getting help? And like you were saying, Rachel, too, it's so important that when that partner pretends to want to get help, and most people will get help and it'll get better. in some cases,
Right.
but not always, so often it can get worse as well. So you really got to look at, two factors to it. Is this person really, really 100% wanting to get better? Are they willing to, stop the self-destruction and stop the destruction of you? And, and be able to find other tools in their tool belt to get healthy, to have a positive mindset, and be respectful in their relationships. Because often they're not very respectful in, family relationships or even friendships. I found that most men that are toxic like that, they don't have very many friends. That's another clue. What is their relationship like with their family, and what is their relationship like with their friends? Do they have friends?
Right.
Often they don't, and if they do, that friend is probably most likely a lot like them. And or questions like, what was their relationship like with their families?
Right.
Because often that's a really important part to see. How did they grow up? What was their things that they were taught, in how to create healthy relationships? I mean, we can have toxic relationships and get out of it, with family members as an adult, but really, what did they take out of it as a lesson? What they learned from it that they no longer want to repeat themselves? I look at, I grew up in a really toxic, abusive household. And my brother Jeff and I are the only two that decided, hey, we don't want to be like that. There was 5 of us, right? But the other ones were like, well, we're just going to keep creating this negative energy around us and these negative patterns of abuse, whether it's self-sabotage or whether it's abusive energy or negativity in general,
Right.
towards others or their lifestyle. Lifestyle is really important, how we live our lifestyle. Is our lifestyle really filled, with the things that serve our purpose to our highest, best, and good? Or is there chaos still there, in some form or manner? It doesn't have to be really bad chaos, but any kind of chaos, or toxicity. And yeah, so like you were saying, really kind of recognizing those things, but also being able to put up your boundaries, being able to find yourself again. I always say, when we separate or we divorce or we get rid of a relationship that isn't really good, now we have to find our center again, right? We have to find out who we are. We've got to figure out, who am I, right? What is my purpose? Who am I as a person? And find that true self. Because we often can get that piece of us lost,
Right.
and I call it our stolen energy, right? We no longer know who we are. And, but even with men, it's so true. There's so many men. I remember having a good friend who was married to a really, really toxic woman. I mean, she would come into the meetings at the chamber stuff that we were at and create chaos at the meeting, right? So, with her husband, and he would, the guys that were his friends would have to protect him while we were at these meetings, in Portland. And to think that that person was so toxic and so jealous, and she was so abusive towards her husband. Her husband was a very kind, nice, and gentle person. It would never harm a soul. He was one of these people that was a peacemaker. He just wanted peace and happiness in his life. We all do, right? And so eventually he did divorce her, but he also had to put a restraining order on her, and he also had to go through these terrible, terrible things to have to protect himself in order to step out of the situation. So, it happens with men too, just as much, I would say men probably are more embarrassed, or they don't talk about it so much as women would.
Yep.
Now, women kind of wear their emotion on their sleeve more than men would. Men kind of harbor it, hold it, and don't release it. Don't
Well, that's
really talk.
that's part of like the generational trauma from,
It is.
from the white side of, mentality of don't
Mhm.
talk about it.
Yeah.
Men can't, men don't go through trauma. It's embarrassing. It's
Mhm.
degrading, it demasculates. And so it's like you
Right.
suppress, you suppress, you suppress, you
You
keep,
bet.
you be quiet. And then especially if
Mhm.
you're a veteran, then it's even more of like you're this badass, excuse my language, but warrior. And so it's like you should be able to take on anything. So how dare you have emotion and trauma, and there's no possible way that you could get abused because you're out here, as a military. So that's just like insane. You're
Right.
probably the
Yeah,
abuser.
yeah.
So it's this mentality that has been put on from, like, I see it's from religion and from the white side of the
Right.
society of, men don't have feelings, you suppress it, you keep your mouth shut. But that's not the
Mhm.
way of our living. That's not the way of the
No.
indigenous culture. That's not. I was even telling one of my clients, I was like, that's not the way of the Vikings either, because he's a
Right.
Viking,
It's
has
true.
that Viking blood. And I'm like, that's
Right.
not the way. It's, you should be able to go home and
Mhm.
cry in the bosom of your woman, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that's,
Feel
that's the whole
open.
terms. Yeah. And
Mhm.
you should be able to come home on that day and be able to rest and lay your head, with your woman and be coddled. But in the society, they make it very hard, that it's looked down and frowned upon. And it becomes embarrassing for men to even want to try to open up about it. And but that's where too, I think, like with women, I hear is, men can't get abused. Well, I think that's where
Mhm.
part of that needs to change too, is,
Right.
women stop speaking that way. Because if you want these men to heal, then you have to create safe space.
Mm.
We want men to create safe space for us to heal and be vulnerable and talk, but why aren't we
Yeah.
doing the same for them too?
Yeah, that's so true. It's so important. Really
and
is.
that's and that's that yin and yang, and that balance. And going back into having a healthy relationship versus a toxic one, is that we get in mentalities that it's all about the women, and but we forget about the men, or in whatever relationship. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
you have to find the balance between that, of where you're constantly, it's like the cup image of, I'm pouring into you, you're pouring into me, and we're constantly pouring into each other, constantly pouring into ourselves, and then doing that healing work. But everyone needs this healing, and it's not just
Mhm.
man and it. This is two spirit relationships too. It's not just man and woman relationship. It's also two spirit, in
Mhm.
relationships. And and then again, like we were talking about, coworkers and
Yeah,
um family and friends. And
true.
so setting these healthy boundaries and things. So I think this is a really good place to kind of like wrap this up. And but I want to
Mhm.
we'll set up a time, and we'll do the manifesting goals class, and maybe do set up like a workshop, or something. I'll get that set up with you, so that
Mhm.
we can do that. And for those that are really interested in learning more about manifesting your goals, this is something we can dive further into as well. Um,
Mhm.
but before we wrap
Yeah.
up, is there anything like last message, inspiration that you would like to leave with everyone?
Yeah, I would like to basically reiterate with everyone too in this time, seems like through this COVID time, we really, really had, some strange things coming out through this. And I've even seen, friends who were friends for years and years and years, where it's caused a severe divide between friendships, but then it's also showing the reality of who people really are. But it's also really, telling yourself, you have boundaries, you have a purpose, you have a goal, and to create those healthy boundaries and those healthy goals. but also finding yourself, staying within your true self, and, always taking back your power. Don't let anybody steal that energy or your goals or just who you are, because it's so important as we get lost in, the negative mindsets of others that we don't feed into it. We don't keep feeding that negative energy, because what happens is when we keep feeding it and feeding it by creating more argument or creating more of the negative, when it's being fed onto us, it's really about creating a different reaction to get a different action, right? What do we want out of it? And so we've got to find how to communicate, not just with ourselves and our partners or our friends or our family members, but creating a healthy and positive communication that serves everybody's purpose, without negativity. And so often when I have friends or even family members that want to bring up negative topics, I'll kind of reroute it with something positive, like, well, let's look at this side of it. It's probably that counseling side of myself, but at the same time, it's really, I don't want to keep feeding the negativity. So I don't want to keep speaking in that negativity either.
Right.
So I want to create something healthy within it. Because often people that do have that negative mindset or abusive tendencies, they want to keep you feeding into it. So they'll create the argument, and then they'll argue with you to get you to argue back. Then they'll create more negativity and blame on you, so you'll always be the fault. But actually you're not.
Right.
And so it's really about learning how to communicate in such a way where you are no longer feeding the negativity. So that's so important, to be able to diverse it and say, well, no, that's not how it really is. This is your reality, but this is my reality over here, right? Totally different. Two spaces from what that person may be projecting at you. But really, communication is going to be a big key. I think often we tend to lose that level of communication on how to kind of put out the fire, basically, without creating more fire.
Right.
So we don't want to keep feeding the fire. We want to divert the fire. We want to kind of put it out. We want to smooth it out, right? We want to create something positive that helps to also rationalize with the person without angering them. With what they're really saying or doing. But again, making sure you create your boundaries. And if the toxicity is so bad and it's never ending, then you have to step out of it. You have to step away, find yourself in a different way, where you're not living underneath those toxicities. And that includes relationships with friends. If a friend is just constantly draining, negative, we've got to put up those boundaries with that friend. We can't always live within whatever it is that they choose to not change, basically. Right. That makes sense. Even family members. So yeah, but I've been blessed. I've been blessed with Rachael and, having such beautiful family members, and, it's so, I don't know, it's a rare thing anymore these days, but it does exist, it exists.
That's where the energy part comes back into it too, because if I hadn't been putting that energy out to bring, a family member that's on this level, to speak with me and to walk with me, and you wouldn't have done it too. It's like we both found each other, because realistically, for all those that I'll share this with you, the first time I ever met my cousin here was actually in a salon, and I heard her speaking to my best friend, and in my mind I'm like, I just have to meet with her. I didn't know, they weren't telling me, the spirits weren't telling me you were my cousin yet, but they were saying that we need to connect, that I need to know you, and we need to be together. And I was, in my mind, I was like, well, if it is, then she'll hand me her business card. And so you're like talking, I think you were talking about some paranormal activity with Monica. And So then I was like, just listening and things. I'm like, okay. I'm like, huh. I'm like, wow. I'm like, all right. But I'm like, but if she's real, she's going to hand me, she's going to hand me her
Yeah.
business card. So you're about ready to walk out. And then all of a sudden you stop dead in your track and you're like, oh, I've got something for you. And you reach in your purse and you grabbed it and you're like, here, give me a call. And it was your business card. And I was like, okay. So then I go in there and I go to see you at your center, and then we're
Yeah.
like working and doing ancestral work, and then we find out we're cousins. Like they're saying we're related. And so it's
Yeah.
like, so my point is that, you know, you may not even know, like I didn't even know who, you know, Sherrie was 12 years ago, but going through and, you know, just reconnecting and just being on that vibration of attracting and her being on the same, we found each other. And so that's the what I'm saying is like, so when you're out here, you know, and you want these people, you want someone that can walk with
True.
you have to manifest it. You really have to sit and every day, you know, this is what I want. This is who I want. This is the best friend I want. It doesn't even have to be an intimate
Yeah.
relationship. It could just be a best friend that you
Right.
want, or a family member to walk with, or, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's attracting that energy and going back to that positive place of, okay, this is what I want to attract. These are the people I want to attract. And, you know, that's where you just kind of like the surrender, and the universe will bring it to you. And, but then you also, you can't go and think negative against it, because if you're like, I'm going to attract these people, and then all of a sudden, oh, but I'm not worth it, or I'm not deserving. So what the universe just heard was say, they're like, oh, you want this? Okay, we can give it to you here. This is here for you. And then all of a sudden you're like, but I don't
True.
know. And the universe is like, all right, like, okay, we'll put it over here then. I guess you didn't want it. So it's like, you have to be
Yeah.
careful when speaking, when you're manifesting,
True.
because you don't want to say something and then you're like manifesting it, but then all of a sudden you go self-sabotage and say something negative, and then you just
Yeah.
canceled out your own, you know, prayer of
Yeah.
what you're praying and asking to receive from, you know, the divine and from the universe and from creator. And so you want
Right.
to be conscious, you know, have that self-awareness when you're going through and manifesting, and you're elevating that. You got to work on the negative part of it, you know, so that you're not canceling out your own things that you're trying to manifest and bring into your life. So
True.
I just want to leave with that, is be self-aware. And when you're thinking in the positive, you just have to be, and when those negative thoughts come in, that it takes 3 seconds to change that negative thought into a positive. And Lindsay, we're actually going to be talking about menstrual cycles, the mooning cycles, bringing my mother back on in a couple weeks to be talking about the mooning cycle and with those things. So stay tuned for that. And thank you, everyone. This was a little bit longer today. We already kind of had a feeling this could run into 2 hours. And so for those that are on other platforms, this segment will be broken down into 2 pieces so that it will fit on the platforms. So thank you, Us, you know, for being here. It was an honor to have you again and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with everyone. And again, if there's topics, things that you would like to be heard and talked about, send me a message, let me know, and I'll get those things set up. And I hope you all have a beautiful day today, and blessings to you. And
Thank you.
stay positive.